Okay, it does need a little bit more, but then all we're going to do, you can then switch to a finer sanding stick. This one is a slightly finer grit on it, okay, and then same thing, and just work your way through the sanding sticks as you go through. So if we can just get this area roughly done, I can show you. But the great thing with the super glue as well is that you don't get any shrinkage, okay? Now shrinkage is where the super glue or your filler shrinks back as it dries and goes in. Super glue with a bit of kicker doesn't do that, okay? But if you used to be using something like a normal filler, and I can show you a good point of that in a moment, you'll see what I mean. Sanding sponge next. All your sanding sponge is really designed to do is take out all the scratches perhaps you've made by the sanding sticks. So what we do, we just give a run over. Okay, feeling. Now I've got a couple of bits to do, but you can probably see the area there, it's quite nice. And then what you can actually do is grab one of these. Now this is the polishing one. Okay, so then you can just, if I just show you on the inside, using the green side, use them dry, don't use them wet at all. Because the thing is, if you use them wet, they actually sort of disintegrate, it comes off. But what this will do is take out all the scratches. It's not designed for sanding, it's designed for finishing. That's why it's the polishing one. Okay, so we just give it a rub over just like that, and then you can probably see it's getting quite shiny under there. Then cut to the white side. The white side is obviously what we did for polishing canopies. If you've seen a recent one I did on polishing canopies, it's got bite. Don't think it's just there for the look, but you can just give it a quick rub over, and as you'll see, it'll go very, very shiny because it's actually making it like a gloss finish. Okay, which you can probably see now is very, very shiny. And that is how we do sanding and filling. Now that's not perfect yet, to be honest, I've just shown you. I'm going to have to take a little bit more time, but you'll feel it, and it is just like pure gloss. Shrinkage, good example. You might have seen earlier, we put that little bit of in here. If I catch you in the light, you see that little depression, this bit just in front of my finger? Okay, that is where it shrunk back. Okay, now originally when we sanded it, it was all fine, no problem at all, but we're going to have to come in here and redo it. So we're just going to give it a little sand. And all that is, that's the green filler we had at the bottom has really given out, and it shrunk back over the last few days since we did it. So all we do, we sand it back again to the green filler, take care of it all off of that nose, and hopefully that will be the end of it. But we just sand it over like that, again in with a sponge like we did last time. Okay, then you can polish it up. And this is how we're going to do the entire model as well. Okay, quick go with the gloss one. And there we go, we're back to the green again, just like that. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to carry on and do the same for all of these. We'll come back and I'll show you about putting some more of the Mr. Surfacer on to make it to a nice fine finish, but it's going to take me a bit of time to go through all of these. And we can talk about this one we had down here, which was the big gap. I'll show you about doing that one from start to finish. So give me a minute to get these done. So okay, judging by all the filler dust, you can probably see we've been sanding and filling all those joints down roughly. The other things we've done at the same time, wings gone together, pretty easy, just two sandwiches together. Couple of holes, make sure you open them up if you're going to have the weapons pylons. We've taken care of a few little areas on the actual nozzles themselves and sanded them roughly into shape. One thing to remember, if you get any fingerprints, it's a bit of a CSI moment this. What tends to happen is that the glue off your, the oils off your fingers can cause the super glue, if you use super glue like I did down here and for putting in the photo edge, to adhere to it. It's a bit of a nasty thing to try and shift afterwards, so it's easier to do it now before you stick them on. Pretty straightforward getting these on, so all we're going to do is pop him down. Remember to make sure you cover up the inside. Now you do tend to get a gap, it's not a perfect sort of match made in heaven down here, so with a bit of jostling you can sort of get it in, but what you want to do is make sure you get these rear ones in as best as you can to start with, and then have a look round and see how they position and things like that. And then when you're happy with the alignment, just like that, you can do it two ways. Once you're happy with alignment, which I was until it jumped, Two ways of doing it. You can either just pop round with the liquid thin, or you can do what I'm going to do. I'm just going to tack this rear into position with a bit of super glue, purely for speed. And then everywhere else we're going to do with liquid cement, okay, to get that round. Using the mix of the two gives you the strength of the weld that liquid cement gives you, and then obviously if you are using super glue, it gives you that instant grip and hold in place. The only thing is I wouldn't use it if it's in tricky little areas. Now we've got a little gap down the side here, probably where I've over sanded, to be honest, the top of the actual intake itself. I was trying to flatten it off a little bit. It's okay, it will push in, but then obviously we'll be taking away from other areas. So we're just going to nudge it forward, and that's why you were using the tack on the back with a tiny bit of filler just down there. We'll take care of that. To be honest, the other side went in fine, so I know it's not an alignment issue. Okay, so we just pop those in right the way round on the inside as well. Okay, and just glue into position. Now this takes a little bit to go off, and I find holding it is obviously the best way to it. At the same time, we can put the wings on. Obviously I can't show you because I'm holding, but just make sure you've got the angle correct. Now if you've got a gap at the bottom, like we've got a small gap running down here, don't worry about it too much, as long as you've got the correct angle of the wings. So you want to make sure that there's no lift it should be in or drooping down. You want a nice 90 degrees to the fuselage. If you're happy with that, glue that one into position as well. And then what we can do, we're going to go around then with the Mr. Surfacer over all the joints and everything else, let that dry, we can sand it down and then rescribe, and then start adding all the little extra bits that come with the photo etch set. So obviously we've got plates and various things that are going to replace some of the details on this. But first of all, what we need to do is take care of is to make sure the overall fit of the aircraft is perfect, in alignment, any rescribing's done and things like that before we start moving on to adding PE. Okay, so those wings are on there and dried now, and so are those intakes down there. Now, we can sand up the wings, but we're going to do that all at the end. So what we want to do is take care of any little gaps. Now, many years ago, you used to get gaps like underneath the wing here. Okay, now that is just caused because we want it to be at the correct angles for the actual wings to be all square and aligned. So because of that, we've caused it. Now, a few years ago, it would have been a real problem with things. You pump it full of filler, sand it down, make a bit of a nasty mess and all the rest of it. Two ways of doing it these days. You can either put a shim of plasticard down there. Now, plasticard literally comes in strips like, if I can buy an off cut of a bit, it would be a bit easier than showing you a giant sheet. It says, like here, you can buy little thin strips of it. Okay, now this is 0.75 of a mil. Okay, so if we show you both ways, so I can get a piece out. And when they're pre-cut like this, it's quite nice because you can just feed them in. Then actually what you can do, we just bring it in a little bit. Okay, you can actually come along with the piece, we deliberately make it a little bit too long. Okay, and you can literally feed it in to the gap. Now if it's going to go or not, I'm not too sure because of the thickness. Yes, it will go, which is handy. Now you might not get it in all the areas, but if you can get it into a few of them, it will help out. And there we go, we just feed that in. So you've actually got it in, and you can literally just push it down in the gap like so. So you can see it in there. And obviously we've got a little bit left over on the end. So we'll just cut that off, just like that. And we're going to push it flush down into our gap that we've got. Okay, just in there, then all we do, come along with a little bit of extra thin glue or a weld type glue or a hot glue that's actually going to melt it all in. Okay, over it just like that. Takes care of that gap really nice and easy like that. Then this one up here, obviously you can then use other little bits, or you can literally just use a bit of filler. Over on here, we've got another gap. Okay, so if we show you on this one, all we're going to use is your traditional type of filler. Now I just always use the back end of a paint stirrer, you get the sort of flat edge for it, but we can just grab a little bit, okay, and then all we do is literally work it into the gap. Okay, now because it's a big deep old gap, we're trying to get it in there. We don't want to be filling the entire thing, so you're trying to make a layered effect Okay, and we can just smooth that all down, grab a bit more, just over the top. Now the trouble with using traditional fillers is it used to make a right old mess when you come round to clean up and all the rest of it, and I'm just chucking this on wildly at the moment. Two things to remember about filler we spoke about briefly earlier. First of all is that, here we go. First of all is that it will shrink, okay? Most fillers do. I don't know of a filler that doesn't shrink in some type of way. Now, I know somebody's going to come along now and say, oh, have you tried such and suches? But to date, I haven't found anything that doesn't do it. So we've cleaned that up a little bit, as you can see. That needs to totally dry off. Once that is, you can either take like an acetone and something like that, clean it, or just cellulose thinners that you clean your airbrush with. That will take that quite nicely, as we can see. So then what you can do, once those two are on, that's just two ways. If I just do this other one here, up the front here, just get those into position. So we're just going to wildly go over the top a little bit. Place those in. Now, the other thing is as well, we spoke about them briefly before, but we go a little bit more in detail. Putties. Now, obviously, you might have seen into my old videos, I have this, okay? This is just Squadron Green putty, okay? And then all I do is that it's dried out and everything in here. Add a little bit of thinners to it. It thins it down again. You can make it up and make it into really any type of consistency you like. Okay, but you can buy off the shelf ones. So for instance, I have got another one around here somewhere, which I can't see off the top of my head, but I did buy one the other day. There it is. So we have 500, it's quite thick. We've got the 1000, is a lot thinner, and then obviously got the 1200. All these are liquid putties. Great thing about these is that when you paint them on, they do tend to dry very, very quickly. That's because they're obviously enamel based or lacquer based type of thinner. So all we're going to do is just take an oldish brush. Don't use your best brushes on these. Okay. Then we just take a bit out of the pot and you just go along to all your joins and seam lines. Now we're just going to slap this on quite thick to everywhere which has got a seam or a join or anything like that. And then what this will do, it has a filler capability. Okay. And we'll fill them in. So we're just going to paint these down everywhere that it's had one. Now you can give this a couple of coats and build it up, but as I've said with all workings like this before, take your time, let them build up. Okay, you're never ever going to do filling. Very, very rarely do you do a filler job that's going to do it in one coat. Okay, so what we're going to do as well, we're going to go down and do these seals down in here. Okay, all the way round. And then that way you won't get any nasty gaps and surprises as we go over. Now it's really easy to clean this up, and you'll see that in a moment when we come to using acetones and things like that. So we're going over those top ones that we've sanded down before and everything else, and that way we can use this because you will see any gaps, lumps and bumps around as you do this. Okay, so we're going to go right over those front ones we took care of. Okay, only drawback to doing it this way is that yes, we are going to have to bite the bullet and do a little bit of rescribing because this will cover up any holes and joins you might have. Okay, but it is well worth doing this because it just gives that little bit more of a professional look because you'll have perfect seams every single time. Okay, so we give that a run, and I'm just going to do just down on these air scoops where the photo etch part joins the plastic, just to make a slightly better join of the both of them. Again, we're going to clean all this up, so don't be too worried about it. These areas where we did that bit of filling, showing different ways of doing it, I'm just going to go over the top with this stuff. Okay, but as I said, it's got a, depending on which version of this you use, it does have a nice filler capability. So we'll just pop those in. Okay, top of these wing seals are really very good, but again, just because we don't want to take any chances, we're going to go and do them. Fill them in, and that way we'll have a lovely looking top side to the aircraft when we come in. So there we go, that's about it. If you see any areas and they look a little bit rough, just pop some more on, because it will smooth things out as well. So these got a couple of little vents down here, looking a little bit rough. We're just going to put some on top of those as well, just so it's got a nicer look to it, more smoother finish to your paintwork and everything else on like that. So we're just going to pop it round those. This back one. Okay, now this stuff's going to take a little bit of time to dry, and obviously we've got some filler underneath, so we're going to let those dry off. As they start to dry back and you see big cracks like appearing down here at this back one, just give it another coat. Okay, and it will all build up. Don't worry about slapping it on quite heavy. Trust me, it'll be well worth it, because all we're going to do is sand, rescribe and blend all of those in to give us nice lines on the model. Okay, so this has been dry now for a couple of hours. A couple of things to remember when you're using hot glues, especially liquid cement, things like that, it's going to soften and melt the plastic. Okay, so when you come along with your sanding sticks and things like that, especially on thinner areas, if you're coming along and sanding, doing leading edges, and you get that sort of balls of it rolling up into it, what's actually happening is that it's still soft, and all you're going to end up doing is chewing it actually out of the plastic. So it's best to make sure it's all totally gone off before you come. Now there's quite a step on this leading edge as we go round, so we're going to use a big one for this, and you might be able to see it on the close-up down here. You've actually got quite a step in between, even in front of that, with the lights are. So we just sand them in. As I say, it's quite a large bit to do on that one. So we're just going to sand those in like so. Again, going through different grades. Then use a smoother one to go through. Okay, then cut to a sanding sponge. Okay, and just remember to round off the actual areas, because when you're using any type of file, you're going to be flattening, and especially on leading edges and that. Leading edges of wings is always an area where you see people's models and they've sort of forgotten it, and you get those little steps in between, the little gaps as they're running down and things like that. Always a little bit unsightly, so just take your time about putting those in. And obviously panel lines, when they do come along leading edges, all too often, especially on sides like here, they don't follow through. So it's something we'll be looking at to improve and replace any that we have lost. Trailing edges as well, just make sure that you've got them filled up together as you actually go through. Okay, using a fine sanding stick, I'm just going to sand those in. And again, we're not trying to flatten them off and make them down, so we're just making a little angle. But again, sanding sponges aren't quite as harsh on those areas. So we're just going to sand those in. And then just having a look. If you have got a gap, just pop back with some glue or perhaps with some liquid filler and take care of them. Now we're going to pick out some of the key ones. So obviously we've done these roughly before, okay? So what we're going to use is quite a fine file. Using the flat one, placing it over the top of it. We don't want to go to each side of it, because with each side you could make a step. So if you keep it on the middle area and just go back and forth on those and just gently shaping it as you maneuver around, you'll very quickly see the areas that have got filler, and then obviously that means there's a little indentation on the back. So you've got two options. You either sand down the front to blend in or build up that back one. But again, use the touch, feel it through. If it feels very smooth and you've got no big joints and things like that, then I wouldn't worry about it. Perhaps another little bit of liquid filler on there will take care of that. So we're just going to clean up also around these vents, the actual intakes, and just smoothing them over, because they should all be in exact alignment as well. Then I'm going to come in with a sponge. I'm going to nicely go over those. We'll just give those a bit of a clean up. And then again, we're going to come in with a finer sponge. So we've got our polishing one here. Okay, and we're going to pop over with it Okay, then we're going to go to the white side just to polish up. The reason for polishing up is it's not very good for painting on because it's so shiny, but it gives you can look at it and physically see if there's any areas and things like that. So we're going to move around to some of the more tricky areas. So at the top here, you could use, if you got them, some of the skinny sponges perhaps. Again, we'll get that to clean out, because otherwise if you're going to come in big one, we're going to end up making a big difference over this. So if we do this side here, okay, we can just pop him, and we can actually just do down here. Again, just be careful about your temperature. Don't get it really hot, otherwise you could end up literally melting through rather than sanding. So what we're going to do, we're literally going across this one, just trying to sand him down. And what we're looking for is any really big differences in here. If you've got big lines and gaps and perhaps big steps, you know, you can either sand them in or fill them in. When we say sand them in, is what I'm saying about is that perhaps, like we had at this front one, it was slightly higher on this leading edge than the trailing edge, so you can sand down a little bit of the front part and building up the rear to bring them in together. But as I said, I think you can't really go wrong with having a look at it. Physical eyeball, Mark 1 eyeball on there will always pay dividends, because if it looks okay and you can't see steps and things like that, and then obviously have a feel of it, see if you can feel a step and things like that. So we're just giving this one a go over here, and they say you've got these little areas just down the back here you might be able to see. That's actually a blemish in the plastic where it's actually got a sink mark onto it rather than the top. This one up here, to be honest, is filler, so we'll take care of that and we'll just sand that out. Just put it in the file. Okay, but as I said, it's one of those things, just working through the grits, taking your time. Because again, you know, if you can take care of any damage here, as you can see, we've got some marks in there now. So all we're going to do now is come along with our polishing sponge, running it down. Okay, but as I said, make sure it's all totally dry, because if you do this too early, you end up, you can probably see it's quite shiny in there, but it's taking care of that really, really nicely. Now, other areas, like down here, if we just get a skinny stick, he says, what have I done with them all? There's one of the more finer, coarse, skinny sticks. Here he is. Okay, so what we're going to do, no, that's a bit too coarse, we want a fine, skinny stick, that's more of a fine one, is just literally going to go along. Now, this side here is where we had, you might be able to see, down here, this is the one where it had that shim of plastic harder in there. You can probably see, you can't even see it. It's a great thing if you can get away with it, because you don't have to wait too long to let it dry and things like that. But it did have a little bit of filler up at the front part. So all we're going to do is sand this one out to show you about sanding it in. Okay. So this is the old-fashioned way you do it, but obviously with a skinny stick it's quite nice, because again you can get in there nice tight area without making masses of damage. Okay, so we're just going to sand this until we're to a point where it feels smooth, or we're just down to plastic, whichever comes first. Okay, and we just do this little step on the inside. Okay, so we just need to do just a fraction more up here. That's it. So okay, with a quick sand job we can get it to here. Alright, so again, in with the sponges. Just like so. Okay, and then in with the polishing one. As I say, this is a real quick job. I'll probably come back and just tighten these up a little bit more, neaten them up. It's just to show you guys how quick and easy it can be. And there we go. Nicely done. Really, really easy. Now, other ways of doing it is with a cotton bud or Q-tip, depending where you are in the world, okay, and thinners. Now I'm using some cellulose thinners, lacquer thinners. You can use nail varnish remover. Just remember, this is quite strong. It is going to attack your plastic as well as anything else. So all we do is just give it a rub over, and you'll see very quickly we should burn through, or melt through in this case, to the area below. Now this is prone to shrinkage and areas like that, but just keep it wet and smooth moving. As soon as it starts to drag and you get things like that, you want to move away. We'll use the other end of that again in a minute. Make it wet. Okay, but what it does do, it does keep everything very nice and clean, because it will clean off all your excess putties and things like that. Should be able to use the other one now. Okay, just like so. So we're just, again, I'm just doing a quick job on this. We'll tighten it up afterwards. But as you can see on that wing, nice job. And that way we haven't got any mass sanding marks and things like it. You might have seen some of my other builds, which I do for doing air intakes to make seamless intakes, where it melts the plastic and the fillet all together. But as I said, the only trouble with that is, well, this side we're using a shim of plastic, a little bit of filler. It's very quick, and then obviously minimal shrinkage back with it. You might get a little bit. This one is prone to a little bit more. So I certainly wouldn't move on now by painting and, you know, sort of basically getting on with the build until I'm sure that that has shrunk down. So we've got to do exactly the same with these intakes and things like that. So again, it's out with the, might as well go the whole hog. Big file. Okay, and take care. So we're just going to do quite a coarse file for the tops of these intakes, where we know we've got a seam line running down there. But again, sometimes it's easier to go with a thinner stick, because you're not going to get so much collateral damage as you're working around everywhere. But just work your way through. Start with a coarse stick, and then when you can't see any more damaged areas down in there, as in you can't see steps and gaps, then you can take care of it. But sometimes, look at it, see, you can see perhaps down in here we've got a little bit of a pit, okay, and you think it's probably worth filling rather than trying to sand down, okay. So we're just going to do this a quick clean out. So we're just going to go and have a look at these, where these join the actual main part of the fuselage, these intakes. And you might see there we've got a little bit of dragging happening. That's where that fillet isn't totally dry. It's what we said about before. So it's worth taking your time, letting it all perfectly dry out. And again, with these intakes, we'll give these a good old sand. And it's all about blending. When you're using any type of filler, you're just trying to blend in and fill the gaps. So I'm going to carry on now, go around all these areas doing the same thing and really taking our time with it, making sure it's all totally smooth before we move on.